What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Michael and welcome to FudgeMuppet. Today we're going to be visiting a fun aspect of Fallout 4, however, it's part of the game that really brings quite a few problems. I'm talking about the added legendary weapons and armor system which Bethesda Game Studios decided to implement into the game. So let's kick things off by explaining this system and how it works. So in Fallout 4 you could find pieces of normal weaponry and armor that were marked as legendary, which meant that they had a star next to their name and possessed a certain random effect. You can find the list of available effects online, and it's quite extensive, providing you with quite the range of potential unique abilities to take advantage of. Obviously, there was also a separation between the possible weapon and armor effects, with armor containing more passive bonuses and weapons often more damage related. Legendary weapons and armor could be bought at various shops in the wasteland and also looted off the corpses of legendary enemy variants. These were random enemies made tougher, also marked as legendary with a star next to their name. They're more difficult to defeat and they have a chance to mutate after you lower their health, bringing them back to full health and granting them combat advantages. They have a legendary piece of equipment in their inventory very often. When you turn the game difficulty up, you have a higher chance of encountering legendary enemies and therefore collecting more legendary loot, if you survive, that is. So what's wrong with a system like this? I mean, it sounds pretty cool, doesn't it? Like, in a way, it is exciting to know that even when I think I've found everything, I can still encounter a randomized tough enemy who drops an item that functions like one I've never found before. For example, I might come across a pair of brass knuckles which have a 10% chance to deal 100 points of electrical damage on a successful block. This would stem from the charged legendary effect added in the Far Harbor DLC. Sounds awesome, right? Well, I agree, there is the benefit of constantly allowing you to find new unique gear, and this can keep things feeling fresh, and I understand why Bethesda would implement the whole concept of allowing you to find more of this gear when you play on a harder difficulty. But the question becomes, was using this legendary weapons and armor system a good idea? And to that, my answer is probably not. Again, I'm not saying it's the worst thing ever, but in this video, I'm going to explain the problems that the system brought to the game, and I'd love for you to tell me in the comments below after you've heard everything I have to say if you think we'd actually be better off without legendaries altogether. So let's begin with one of the primary reasons the legendary weapons and armor system was bad for Fallout 4. This reason is that it heavily decreases the incentive to use, buy, and find unique gear, while also making unique gear not unique at all. So what does this mean? Well, in Fallout games, you often find unique weapons and armor in secret locations, or receive unique gear by completing certain quest choices or buying it for a crazy high price from a shopkeeper. In Fallout 4, however, legendary weapons replaced a lot of the uniques. What's an example of this? Well, the Gainer is a perfect one which comes to mind. The Gainer is a legendary 44 Magnum that you can find by exploring an unmarked map location. The gun has a reflex sight, the comfort grip, a bull barrel, and a standard receiver. However, it has been modified to fire incendiary bullets, meaning you'll be setting your foes alight as you pistol whip your way through the wasteland. It sounds like a sensational unique weapon. Well, the sad part is that it's not really a unique weapon as much as it is a set legendary weapon with a unique name. You see, the Gainer does 15 points of burning damage over time. However, this is just the legendary weapon effect known as incendiary applied to a 44 Magnum. So while it may come across as a true unique, it becomes hard to appreciate it when you can find an exact copy of it on a random legendary enemy that you come across and slay. The weapon won't be called the Gainer, but who cares? It'll function exactly the same. So with this, you can see how there was a lowered incentive to find and use the weapon because you could find it elsewhere and therefore it wasn't a unique. What's worse is that because there are a variety of other legendary effects which are cool, there can be other 44 Magnums with effects that are just as good, such as one with a freezing effect. This deals 10 points of cryo damage and will freeze targets on critical hits. There's loads of unique weapon effects that you can find on legendaries, and while they're powerful and fun, they're just as good as the effects that you find on the so-called unique weapons, which have set locations or are set as quest rewards. Ultimately, what this means is that most of these uniques were were actually just convenient legendaries. You know, I'll just use this unique until later on when I can find some random legendary weapon which is the same or better. I believe this led Bethesda to create less unique weapons overall, and by unique in this case, I literally mean unique. You know, a weapon with a completely different skin to other weapons like it, or one with an effect that can't be found randomly ever. Even just something that functions entirely differently, like Broadsider, for example, a portable naval cannon that allows you to blast enemies with cannonballs. Broadsider was a legitimate unique weapon, and it really felt rewarding when you obtained it. You won't find anything else quite like it in the game. One weapon I originally thought was like this was the railway rifle. I obtained the railway rifle by doing the railroad quests, but then when I got to a higher level, I just found random legendary ones as loot on enemies in a subway. But anyways, besides this, let me remind you of another example which I feel shows off how the use of legendary weapons led to Bethesda creating less true uniques, introducing the Far Harbor DLC. The Far Harbor DLC was quite a fleshed out expansion, especially for Fallout 4, and I quite enjoyed it. There were many things about it that I'll always remember, such as joining the Children of Adam and seeing the Mother of the Fog. However, one big letdown in the DLC was the absolute repetition of receiving the same few weapons over and over again as quest rewards. For example, 2 unique rewards were both radium rifles. One had an explosive effect, and the other had the penetrating effect, which ignores 30% of your enemy's damage and energy resistance. You could find identical copies of these weapons on the bodies of dead legendary enemies. Then looking at more uniques you could obtain in Far Harbor, we come across 2 different harpoon guns, both of which have a legendary effect you could just find on any other random legendary harpoon gun. One had the instigating effect, meaning it does double damage if the target is at full health, and the other had the resilient legendary effect, granting you 150 more points of damage resistance while reloading. Very fitting for a harpoon gun. Cool stuff, but again, boring uniques, and I say uniques with air quotes. Now, if 2 harpoon guns and 2 radium rifles weren't enough for you, how about 2 pole hooks? Same story here, no doubt. One had the VATS enhanced effect, and the other had the wounding effect. There were more examples like this, but just with this, you can see 6 instances in the Far Harbor DLC in which we could have received a real unique. Even if you wanted to be lazy, surely you could just change the colors or add on a small extra effect that couldn't be randomly generated elsewhere. With true uniques, we get real incentive to use them, and they feel valuable because you can't find them anywhere else. There's only the one. I've used weaponry for these examples, but the same thing goes for armor pieces. So ultimately, this is the biggest problem with the legendary system. It's an opportunity cost and an excuse not to add real unique weapons and armor. Why put effort into quest rewards when you can just give out the same weapon but slap on a different random effect that already exists in the game on top? To me, especially in Far Harbor, it just felt lazy. I can still remember the first time I played Fallout 4 with Scott, and we were covering it like crazy on FudgeMuppet. I actually had located the Furious Power Fist extremely fast, and there were no guides on YouTube for it. I didn't really get the whole legendary system though, and I didn't know if the weapon really was a unique. So we didn't make a unique weapon video on it then and there because we didn't want to find out later on that it wasn't actually unique at all. Anyways, it turned out that we should have made a video because these weapons were considered uniques, and to be honest, like I admitted earlier, they are convenient, but I think the cons outweigh the pros when it comes to the big picture. The Furious Power Fist was really cool. You had to get it by fighting a unique super mutant behemoth named Swan, who was covered in plastic swan boat pieces. It truly was an epic encounter as he burst out from the water, yelling and stomping around, doing his best to kill you. You obtained the Furious Power Fist by taking out this boss and looting it off his corpse. The fist does increase damage after each consecutive hit on the same target, which is very neat. Sadly, this is just a normal power fist with the legendary effect known literally as Furious. Anyways, when I found this out, the Furious Power Fist didn't feel so special anymore, so I think I've made the message clear on my primary issue with the legendary weapons and armor system. But are there any other reasons I don't like it, besides taking away the potential for more uniques to have been added, and taking away the incentive to use these legendary weapons we're made to feel are unique in the first place? Well, here's the main second point I have. Legendary weapons and armor tend to make little sense and break the realism of the game. Now, I can already hear what some of you might be thinking. This is the Fallout universe. Things don't have to be realistic. Bethesda can do whatever they want, and it's a wacky game series anyway. Now, don't get me wrong. I totally agree. It is wacky, and there's so many possibilities in the Fallout universe. But here's the thing, and this goes for almost all games. Games should do their best to abide abide by the realism of the world which they have created for themselves. So this doesn't mean that Fallout games should be hyper realistic or anything like that. For example, there's loads of crazy pseudoscience creations in Fallout, like all of the mutated creatures for one, and nutty things like cyborg dogs with implanted brains. All this crazy stuff is perfectly acceptable for the realism of the game because it adheres to the possibilities set out by the world building, and there's an attempt to explain or show how it could possibly work. For example, I don't need to know if a plasma rifle could actually work or not, but I see that they've put effort into making it look like something that functions due to highly advanced science, which I don't understand. Legendary gear, on the other hand, often just doesn't make sense. There's no attempt to explain why it does. Things like bonus damage against certain enemy types is fine to me. It doesn't really stand out as something too over the top, so it would be unfair to say that that's really silly, but here are some examples to show what I really mean. So I pick up a legendary baseball bat. It's made of wood. There's absolutely nothing else on it. It's just a plain old sturdy wooden baseball bat. No electrical wires, no blades, no hidden compartments, just 100% thick brown wood. Anyways, why is it possible for me to pick up one that has the freezing legendary effect? The effect that causes cryo damage, causing enemies to freeze on a critical hit. How can I whack someone with a wooden bat and have them turn to ice? It just makes no sense at all, and while it looks pretty and I definitely had fun abusing it, it just didn't feel right for the Fallout universe. It's almost like Bethesda tried to put Skyrim's enchantment system into Fallout 4, but I'd much rather it be left in Elder Scrolls and then keep the legendary effects that do make sense, and there are plenty of them, and then slap those onto real uniques, designing them to be some of the rarest weapons in the game. Another example I mentioned earlier was being able to deal electrical damage on a pair of brass knuckles by blocking an attack. Let's say an enemy swings a pool cue at me, and I just block it with a pair of plain metal knuckle dusters. The enemy flies back to the ground, electrocuted with massive amounts of damage. They're absolutely fried with messy Einstein hair. It's a funny thought, and it feels beast to do, but it makes no sense and detracts from the potential of uniques in the game. For example, imagine instead of this, there was a pair of brass knuckles with the exact same effect, but there was only one pair like it in the entire game, and they were pitch black, with a yellow electric bolt spray painted on the side, and sparking wires woven all around them like barbed wire. Maybe they had a basic unique name like Shocking Rage. Now this might not be realistic physics-wise, but that's when it doesn't matter. What matters is that there's an attempt to explain the crazy effect. Again, I just want to stress that I'm all for crazy, wacky, unrealistic, sciencey stuff in Fallout. What I'm against is when there's no attempt to make it seem or feel like it could be real. It doesn't matter if it's possible or not in our world. There just needs to be some sort of explanation. For example, if there was a baseball bat covered in some kind of cryolator technology, that would be fine. But freezing enemies with plain wood just feels dumb. Another example would be legendary armor that makes you invisible via the chameleon effect. Again, yes, it's just very cool, and you can have fun with it, but why not make a unique set of armor that has special cloaking technology attached to it, instead of me throwing on some rusty metal boot and having it act like it's a stealth boy? I mean, that's what stealth boys are used for in the first place, you know, because you need some kind of actual technology for cloaking, not a game-breaking legendary effect. Anyways, point being, realism compared to the world we live in here at home doesn't matter so much, but realism to the rules established by the Fallout universe within its own lore and what could be possible does. And that wraps up my thoughts on the problems with Fallout 4's legendary gear system. I do enjoy it and definitely take advantage of it when I play the game, but personally, if I take a step back and really look at it on the grand scale, it has some impacts on the game which were negative for potential uniques, and some effects also broke immersion in various instances. That said, I'd love to hear what you think in the comments below. Did you like the legendary system? Would you want it back in the next Fallout game, or would you prefer it to be more like Fallout New Vegas? What about a hybrid system? Let us know. Social media links are in the description. My name is Michael, and I look forward to nerding out with you again very soon.